All right, Terry Caliendo, Dedicated Managers, back again, trying to wrap this thing up and finish this project. 15th video, we're really into it. We're deep in it here. In the last video, I showed how to just get things set up with Auth0, finally getting their code involved and sending the user over to their universal login to get logged in. So let's take a look at where we're at here. That's not it. This is it. So we are currently logged out, but if I click on members page here, you'll see now I'm going to click login, and you got to watch up here. We're going to switch over to Auth0 and then come right back. You know what? Well, you didn't even get to see it. It's so fast that we went to Auth0 and they just redirected us back. If I do let me just copy localhost 8080 here and redo a new incognito window, and let's load up the app that way. And now when I click members and I click login, now it's taking me to you know, my tenant, which is the VueJS Auth0 on auth0.com, and looking to try and load the user. So because I had logged in before, like I said, when you're on this site, my other app over here, they have the cookies that they think I'm logged in, and so they send back a new access token and stuff. And so as far as they're concerned, I'm logged in. It's just my application isn't handling things correctly. So let's dive into the code and figure out what's happening here. Notice this localhost Auth0 callback. Where does that come from? That comes from the redirect URL. So after the login process is complete on Auth0, Auth0 needs to send the user back somewhere, and we can specify that right here with this redirect URI, which brings them back to the Auth0 callback. And we're combining that URL with our app domain URL, which is stored in our environment variable right now, which is just the local host. Now, if you were in production, you would want to return to www.myproductionsite.com, and then you would store this variable in your development file, and then you would store this variable. Remember, they're the same variable, right? I copied and pasted them. I'm just going to paste it in here just to show that real quick. They're the same up to this point. They're the same variable, but you would put that in your production file, and then when the app is loaded with a development environment, it's going to load this version of that variable, and in the production environment, it's going to load that version. And that's, I talked about, is different based on if you run npm run serve. So npm run serve, that loads the development environment, and the npm run build runs the production environment. So, but I'm not going to do that because I'm just in one environment. So I'm just going to leave it the way it was, like this. And so, but anyway, this local host gets tagged on to, that's this right here. So it becomes localhost / auth0 callback is the redirect URI, and that's where Auth0 is going to send it back to. And now remember, in order for Auth0 to legitimately send back, in your application settings, I'm in my tenant right now under the application of Auth0. So this is my tenant for this application, and this is the key that I used, and this is the domain. All that stuff is lining up. And remember, I needed the allowed callback URLs. I need to specify that localhost 8080 Auth0 callback right here, or Auth0 is not going to allow that callback to happen. And that's what protects me from you using my keys. Actually, you probably could use my key on a localhost environment because I do have localhost here. So you probably could use my keys. I'm going to have to change them or delete this when I'm done with this project, I guess. But obviously, you don't have my client secret, so you can't do any modifications to my application. But you can register users against my application because you have my client ID, and I'm allowing the localhost. But if you were protecting just your domain, you would just, you'd want to delete this local host and have your domain. That's why you want a separate application for your development versus your production, because if you have this local host variable in there in your production environment, then other people can mess with your production environment, I think. So watch out for that security concern. So enough rambling about that. We need to handle this callback, which means we have to create a route that can look at that callback. So let's step into the code here and let's open up our router. And we need to create a route for that callback URL. So again, I am just going to copy and paste, and so I'll just put it at the top here. So I'm giving it a path of Auth0 callback, a name of Auth0 callback, and a component of Auth0 callback. And I need to import, I need to import that Auth0 callback from /views/auth0 callback.view. And now when I save this, it's going to get mad at me down below that it doesn't exist, or at least it should. Oh, I'm not running yet. npm run serve, that runs my thing there, my application, and sets it up in development mode. We'll get an error when that finishes, but now let's go to views and let's create a new file and call it that auth callback.view. And so now I got to put some code in here to handle that. And so I'm just going to put a default template. This is just a basic template for VueJS. Notice the template section up here. All I'm doing is putting something that says finalizing authentication. We're going to see that for a split second. I'll talk about that. But it's really just kind of a dummy place so that we can load that component or have something to put in that component here in the router right here. So talk about that in a second. Notice that down here, this finished compiling, and I guess I didn't get an error probably because I finished, or was there an error and it fixed when I created that file. Anyway, the file's there, the auth callback.view file is there. So let's see if that makes any changes to our front end. So let's go back to home here. Let's go to members, click login, and we're called back to Auth0 callback, and now we're getting that finalized authentication that we talked about, or that I showed in code here in the Auth0 callback. That's right here. Now I could put the code to handle the authentication in here, but I'm actually going to put it in the router to make things more simplified for myself when I'm trying to understand what's going on, or just trying to keep everything in one place. So right before we do this, remember this is the variable that determines whether or not we are logged in. So before that, I am going to check, because anytime we do the auth callback, anytime we're sent to the auth callback route, we're going to want to update the tokens. So we're always going to want to run this no matter what happens afterwards. We're always going to want to do this. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing this allow this to matched some record. I think we talked about that before on the meta requires auth. Basically, this thing is checking that to variable that comes in that tells us about the route, and it finds something that's matched. Well, something's going to match. This Auth0 callback is going to match on the path because we created on the router up above, we created that path. So we're going to get a match if that Auth0 callback is hit. So this is going to be true when this URL is called, and this stuff gets broken off. It's not seen as far as the path is concerned. That's a hashtag. That's a link variant. So this is the base URL, and that's what's going to show up. Actually, just the auth callback is what's going to show up. Oops, wrong button. So what I'm going to do here is then I'm going to console log that the router before each found Auth0 callback URL. We'll see that. And then we'll dispatch to the store to handle the authentication. and then we're going to tell the router to stop doing anything because this thing is going to handle the finishing of the route. Now, that should break because I don't actually have something to dispatch to. This doesn't exist yet. So if I hit save here and it compiles, it'll run. But when I go to my app here and I go to Home, Members, and I click Login, it's going to shoot me over to Auth0. And when I come back, I should get an error that the handle authentication doesn't exist. It doesn't know what to do with that. But we did get the router.beforeeach found Auth0 callback URL. That's our console.log that was right here. So we know we made it into this function. We caught it in the before each. But it did still, interestingly, the next false is supposed to kill the routing, I guess. Maybe I'm misunderstanding something there because, you know, that it is still getting loaded. That component is still getting loaded. All right, so let's go and make that. Action to call. So again, I am just going to paste the code in, and then we'll talk about it. So here I've created an action. It's under the actions. I've created an action to be called. That's what dispatch this store.dispatch. Dispatch calls an action, and it calls the Auth0 handle authentication function within it. So that's why this gets called, and then it passes in the context variable that we talked about before that lets us reach our state variable. We talked about that in the mutations and in the login section, but that's allowing us to reach this object that we set up with all our parameters. And so now we're just going to call its function parse hash, which is a Auth0 function. We don't have to really know what it's doing. We just have to send it the right stuff. We don't even have to send it anything. It's just going to look at the hash. So what that means is it's going to look at the stuff that comes after the hash here and figure out what to do with it. So we send it an anonymous function to run after we call that parse hash. So it calls that parse hash, it parses the hash, and then it runs this functionality here. So within that functionality, we check if, so it's going to send us this auth result variable that is filled. And if it's successful, that auth result variable is going to be populated. It's going to have an access token property on it, and it's going to have an ID token property on it. So that means our call was successful. So this will then run this stuff to log the user in locally. If there's an error, we'll alert that something went wrong, and you can handle this in a different way. But we just let the user know with an alert pop up that the login failed, and then we send them back to the login page, and we console out the error for our own debugging purposes. But this should rarely happen. You'll need to handle that however you want to handle it per your application or business specs. We're going to talk about this stuff in here. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create this expiration variable just to end the session after a certain amount of time. So we take the auth result.expires in. That's something that they're going to send back to us, and that's a time of when the token expires, and they give it to us in milliseconds, and we need to convert it to seconds, and then we call a JavaScript function to get the current date time in seconds, and ultimately what we're doing is adding how many seconds, after the current amount of time in seconds. This is the current amount of time in seconds. Add the expiration amount of time in seconds, how much time is left before that token expires, and put it in a variable. And then what we'll ultimately end up doing when we check to see if the person is still, if the token is still valid, we'll check to see that the the new date and time at that time is less than the less than the expired, so that it hasn't expired. We'll get to that. I didn't explain that very well, but we'll get to that when you see that functionality. And then finally, we take that access token that were sent back and the ID token, and we're going to store them locally in local storage. We're also going to store that expiring variable in local storage. So we've got the credentials of the user, and we've got a time to check for when the expiration is going to happen. When that token is no good, that it won't work anymore, that we'll need to get a new token. And then we just do a router replace, and we can send them anywhere we want. You could send them to your dashboard, or you could send them, our dashboard is the root, so we'll send them back to the home page. Actually, we could send them to the members page now that they're logged in. All right, so I'm going to save that file. It compiled. We're good. It should have hot reloaded. Looks like we did get an error. Well, let's refresh and see. Login failed. Let's just go back to home and hit refresh. That token is probably dead. So we're going to start from the beginning here. We're not logged in, and we're going to click login, and that's going to take us over to Auth0 and authenticate us. Now remember, I was already authenticated, so I should show this in a new incognito window, because I need to actually log that window out. But if I click members here, notice that, well, that's fine. If I click login here, so I will log in, and now it is going to redirect me back. It's going to call that Auth0 callback, and it's going to finalize the authentication, but there is an issue. Let's take a look at what went wrong. So that is router is not defined. So let's go back to the code here and take a look, and somewhere here router.replace is not defined. I have to bring in the router again. Ugh. That should solve that issue. Nope, hang on. It's relative to the directory. That should fix it. Now it's found. So now if we go back to here, we've got issues, but it did ultimately log us in. So now let's just start over and see where we're at. Let's do a new incognito window. And yep, no, I don't want the callback. I just want to log in regular. There we go. Members section. Click login. Apparently my incognito window kept the Auth0, and Auth0 is sending us back. So so let's open up yet another new incognito window here from another browser. Let's paste that in here and just go to the local host. Now I'm going to go to the members. I'm going to click login, and that is still causing issues. All right, I have cleared. I took a pause there and did some clearing stuff here. So this time it should work, where we go to the members page, we log in. Now we're redirected. We're not automatically redirected back yet. I'm going to put in my Terry at Dedicated Managers address, and I'm going to log in. And now it's going to redirect us back. And I redirected us back to the members page, and that didn't work, right? Because we don't have we're not fully logged in yet. We're not telling our app that we're logged in. But if I look at the network here, or no, at the application and the session storage, localhost here, we are not saving the cookies. I mean the local storage, and that's why, because I'm in the wrong place. Let's look at the local storage here. I was here, now I'm here, and if we expand this, so those variables that we saved, the expires at, that's since the epoch, I think, time in seconds, this is the access token, and that's the ID token. So these are the things that we're saving locally, and this is what we'll pass to our service layer when we ask for data. And then the service layer will check that these things are correct against Auth0 using the application secret. So we've gotten to the point where at least we are saving that data. So these three things here are being stored by these three calls here, the access token, the ID token, and expires at. We're setting them locally. Now, we're not checking them locally yet to decide if the user is logged in, and that's what we need to do next. So let's go back to the router here, and we're actually going to implement this now against those local storage. I keep calling them cookies, but they're the same as cookies, but they're local storage. Basically the same idea. So I took some code and I copied and pasted it, and we'll talk about it now. So now we're actually doing the actual check. We're checking to see if the user is logged in. We're going to start out assuming the user is not logged in, so we're going to set it to false. Then we're going to check those three variables that we just set and make sure that they are still there. If they're not there, we're going to consider that the user is not logged in, and we're not going to do anything. That router auth check is going to stay false, and so none of this will get run, and we'll be back in the situation where the user has to go back to the login page. But if those variables are there, that means we went through the login process. Now we're going to check the expires at variable, or to see if the tokens haven't expired. So we're going to take the current time and make sure that it is, whoa, don't change that. We'll make sure that it is less than the time that we stored for that expires at variable. So remember previously in the store, we created that here, and we said that the expires at that we're going to store is going to be the amount of time that the token is good for past the current time. So if we've hit that, then let me get back to, where was it? If we've hit that, you do the math, you figure it out. Ultimately, if the current time is less than that expiration time, then this statement is true, which leaves auth check is true, which means the person's logged in as far as we're concerned on the UI. We don't know that their token is valid. That's for the services layer to decide. Again, we can't do that here on the front end because otherwise we'd have to have our application secret, and we'd have to put that in the code, and the whole world could see that. So we don't want to do that. We're just verifying the user is logged in as far as the front end is concerned, so that we can give them the display of what they would see if they were fully logged in, if they were fully authenticated. But the data, they can't get the data unless our service layer returns the data. So now we're checking to see if the user is logged in. So if I save this file and go back to the front end, we click members, we'll click login. I'm not sure if this is going to work or not. We're sent back. There. So now we are officially logged in because we're checking now to see that those keys are there. So those three things are found. That's why we're getting to see the members page. And so now we've officially got the person logged in, and so anytime they come to the site, they are going to already be logged in because those tokens are present. So next we need to implement the logout functionality. That does nothing right now, and what that logout functionality is going to do is basically delete these tokens. So if I delete these tokens locally, and now I refresh, I can't get to the members page. I was redirected back to the login page. So that's really all that's telling our code, our front end, whether or not the person's logged in. So if I click login again, it's going to take me to Auth0, bring me back, fill in those tokens. That's all the code we just wrote, and then it allows me to view the members page. So these tokens down here in local storage are what these three parameters are what allows the UI to know that the person's logged in. Now again, I want to hammer home that if I just delete these, if I route, and now I try to get that members page again, it's gone. So again, every time I hit a route, it's checking those variables locally to see if they're there. They're not. So the UI changed. Now notice that we didn't get the the logout should have disappeared because those cookies were gone, or those storages were gone. So really, we should go back to the code and take this. We need to put something here that, so the route figured out that this came back false. So this is not run. And what we need to do is take this set user is authenticated. And we know that if router auth check is false, the user is not authenticated. So let's just always force that anytime we get here to tell the UI that the person is no longer logged in. So now that logout will occur. So let's see if that happens this time. I'll log in. It's going to take us to Auth0, bring us back, put the tokens in, and the logout shows up. So now if I delete these and I do a route, you see the router figured out that those tokens were gone, and I should switch the UI to the person no longer being logged in. So that's our functionality. Now we just have to talk about why that screwed me up so much in this. When we click login here, it takes us to Auth0 and brings us back right away. Even though we logged out, it should force the person to log back in, right? And what we need to do is we need to clear those cookies over on the Auth0 side. And so as this recording has hit 26.5 minutes right now, we're going to end it here, and I will talk about everything that was causing me these issues, that I probably should have implemented the logout button first to make my life easier. But we'll talk about that in the next video. We'll get into the logout functionality. So again, Terry Caliendo, Dedicated Managers, another happy and exciting video, finishing these up because I did get a request from somebody to pound these out. Well, not to pound them out, but to finish them. And I get very excited when somebody actually sends me feedback. So thanks for watching. Hopefully this is helpful. I know I'm blasting through these final portions, but hopefully you're getting the idea, and I'm going through the code enough that you can understand. I just figured if I typed every single line, we'd be here for hours, and your eyes would probably be more glazed over than they already are. So again, Terry Caliendo, Dedicated Managers. Find us on YouTube here. Subscribe. If you're not logged in like I am, you'll see a subscribe button on my page. I've got 231 subscribers. That's awesome. I remember when I was excited to hit 100. Now I'm excited to hit 1,000. Looking forward to that day. Take care. Have a great day. Happy coding. Signing out. See you later.